Every morning at exactly 7:30, she sat at the same bus stop bench, thermos in one hand, a children's book in the other, and began to read, not to a crowd, not to a child, just into the morning air. Some people glanced, others stared. A few laughed quietly from their car windows. Most ignored her altogether. But she never missed a day. Rain, snow, wind didn't matter. She turned every page like it was sacred, read every line like someone was listening. And then, one morning, the bench was empty. The air felt different. No voice, no pages turning, no presence at all. But the next day, she returned, a framed photo clutched in her hands, her voice trembling as she began again. And that's when something changed. The street fell silent. Engines stopped. People stood still. And for the first time, she wasn't reading alone. This is Stories Unfolded. And today, we're sharing the story of a woman who kept reading to someone the world had forgotten, until the world remembered her. Her name was Evelyn Harper, and if you passed her on the street, you probably wouldn't remember her face. She didn't dress to be noticed. Her clothes were neat, practical, the kind older women wore because they knew what lasted. She kept her gray hair pulled into a low twist, tied with a clip that had once been gold, now dulled with time. And she carried a thermos every morning, with the word Leo engraved along the bottom in tiny, fading letters. She lived in a modest brick house 2 blocks from the corner of Maple and Third, a street no one ever called important, but one that quietly connected a school, a bakery, a nursing home, and a row of sleepy townhomes. It was on that corner that Evelyn made her place, every weekday morning, same time, same seat. She would settle on the far end of the bench, set down her thermos, open the day's book, and begin to read. Not loudly, not performatively, just clearly, like someone reading to a child at bedtime. Except there was no child, just Evelyn, and the air around her, and the stillness of the early hour, interrupted only by the occasional bus engine or a bird on the power lines. People noticed, of course. At first, they assumed she was waiting for someone, maybe a grandchild, maybe a neighbor, but no one ever joined her. So they began to speculate. She's not hurting anyone, some said. Poor thing's probably lost her mind. Others laughed it off. Another quirky town fixture, like the statue with the missing plaque, or the coffee shop that never opened before 10. But Evelyn didn't seem to hear any of it. Or if she did, she didn't let on. She turned her pages slowly, carefully, as if every word mattered more, because she was the only one who still believed it did. One day, a teenage boy on a scooter rode past and yelled, "Who you talking to, lady?" Evelyn looked up, eyes soft behind her glasses, and said, "Someone who used to wait here." And then she kept reading. Inside her home, time had stopped. Photos of a boy lined the fireplace mantel. A shoebox filled with crayon drawings sat on the table near the front door. And on her nightstand, a stack of books, dog-eared and worn, each one marked with a sticky note that read, "Leo liked this one." Leo was Evelyn's grandson. She'd raised him since he was 3, after her daughter passed away in an accident Evelyn never talked about. Leo was her world, a quiet, curious boy who loved frogs and peanut butter and anything with dragons in it. He used to wait with her at that same bus stop every morning. She would read him stories until the yellow school bus came around the corner. He never asked her to stop. Even when he got older, even when the other kids teased him, he'd still lean close and whisper, "Just one more page, Grandma, please." But one morning, he didn't get on the bus. Because he couldn't. The diagnosis had come fast. A rare condition. One of those names with too many syllables and not enough treatment options. Leo was gone in under a year. Evelyn didn't hold a big funeral. She didn't put up a memorial plaque. She just kept showing up to the bench where they used to sit and kept reading. She told no one. Not the neighbors. Not the pastor who stopped checking in after a few months. Not the pharmacist who asked if she was sure she still needed children's vitamins. But the silence became too loud at home. So she filled it the only way she knew how, with stories. The street didn't know what to make of her. But slowly, without anyone planning it, Evelyn became part of the neighborhood's rhythm. People began to anticipate her voice as part of their commute. The barista at the corner cafe timed the milk steaming to start after she hit the second page. The jogger who usually wore earbuds began leaving one ear open. The garbage truck driver slowed his engine near the stop, not to avoid noise, but to avoid covering hers. And no one said anything. Not yet. But they noticed. They listened. They began to wonder. Not if Evelyn had lost something, but what exactly she had found. It happened on a Wednesday, the kind of morning no one expected anything from gray sky, drizzle clinging to windshields, just cold enough to make people tuck their collars a little higher. The bus stop bench sat empty. No thermos, no book, no Evelyn. At first, no one said anything. It was easy to assume she was late, or maybe tired. Maybe the weather had finally kept her inside. But then 7:35 came. Then 7:40. The bus passed. Still no Evelyn. The jogger slowed down at the corner, looked toward the bench, and kept going, but not at his usual pace. The woman in the bakery noticed too, glancing through the fogged glass and hesitating before turning back to refill the pastry tray. A school bus driver looked at the bench as he passed and sighed quietly. He'd never told anyone, but Evelyn's voice reminded him of his mother. No one made an announcement. No one knocked on her door. But the neighborhood felt off. It's strange how absence has a weight of its own. By Thursday, the questions started. Did anyone check on the reading lady? You think something happened? She's always there. At the corner store, the clerk who usually saw Evelyn pass with her thermos asked the mail carrier if she'd seen her. She hadn't. Even the teenage boy who once shouted at her paused at the bus stop that morning. He didn't sit. He didn't say anything. He just looked at the bench like it was supposed to tell him something. And it didn't. Friday morning came. The sky cleared. And Evelyn returned. She wasn't early, like usual. She arrived just as the first bus passed, holding a small wooden frame wrapped in a plastic bag. She looked older, or maybe just more tired. She sat down, slowly, set the frame beside her, and opened a familiar book, the same one she'd read to Leo every day the year he got sick. The Velveteen Rabbit. Her hands trembled on the first page. Her voice cracked halfway through the second. But she kept reading, and when she finally looked up, she saw them. People, lined along the other side of the street. Some standing, some sitting on the curb, some holding coffee cups, backpacks, phones, now lowered, now still. Not saying a word, just listening. A few had brought chairs. A young mother clutched her daughter's hand, An older man stood with his arms crossed, blinking hard against the sun. The jogger had stopped running entirely, just stood there, hands on hips, catching his breath for longer than he needed to. And in the middle of it all, a boy no older than 7 walked across the street without a word and sat beside Evelyn. She looked at him. He didn't speak, but he opened his own book, and she nodded. They read the last page together. The crowd didn't cheer, didn't clap, didn't film. They just stood, in complete, reverent silence. It wasn't about performance. It was about remembering. That night, Evelyn placed the framed photo of Leo back on the mantel. She smiled at it gently, then turned toward the couch, sat down, and began marking a new book with a sticky note. Leo would have liked this one. The next morning, the bench wasn't empty. It wasn't crowded either. Not the way things get when a story goes viral or the cameras start showing up. That wasn't the kind of story this was. It was quieter than that. Gentler. People still passed by, some in a rush, some with earbuds in. But a few, more than before, slowed down, paused. Saturday. And Evelyn. She kept coming. But she didn't always bring the same book anymore. Sometimes she'd read stories about space, sometimes about turtles, sometimes about a boy with a wild imagination and too many questions, just like Leo. And more often than not, someone else would join her. A child, a parent, a stranger who didn't want to be one anymore. Sometimes they'd bring their own books. Sometimes they'd just listen. Sometimes they'd sit in silence, letting the rhythm of the words fill the space between them. And somehow, a simple bench at a quiet corner bus stop had become something more. Not a stage, not a memorial, just a place where one voice had reminded a community what it meant to pay attention, what it meant to care. She wasn't trying to change the world. She was just trying to hold on to one part of it that mattered. But in doing that, she reminded the rest of us that presence is more powerful than performance, that grief doesn't always need fixing, just witnessing, and that even the smallest voice, read into an empty street, can echo longer than we ever imagine. This was Stories Unfolded. Because sometimes the quietest people leave the loudest mark.